As Mr. Dutt said, I was also one of his history students. He produced 5 professors, so I guess I am living proof that he does not succeed every time. Friends, I hope you will forgive me if I also read my remarks. It must be more than 20 years ago now that I remember sitting in my office working on some document now long forgotten when an envelope arrived addressed to me in an unfamiliar handwriting. I opened it to find a photocopy of a page from an old Fiji newspaper called the Pacific Review. Only a few of us will remember it now. It was an October 1970 edition, the time of independence. The Pacific Review had sent a reporter to Viuto Primary School to interview 7-year-olds about self-government. I was one of those 7-year-olds. The question posed to us was, what does an ombudsman do? There was my picture and my answer. He sprays grass and weeds at the side of the road. I'm sure my answer was given with my usual self-assurance, even if accuracy suffered somewhat. And I'm sure some people who read my writings these days will say that 51 years on, nothing much has changed. Anyway, the photocopy was accompanied by a short handwritten note from Professor Brij, telling me that he was working in the National Archives just down the road from my office. He had come across this example of my junior wisdom and wanted to remind me of it. I still have the note somewhere, only now do I realize how it will be a treasured possession. And I was touched on that day that Professor Brij himself would take time from his painstaking researches to send me his note. I suppose even serious scholars need a break from time to time. And I suppose it is a reminder that even before today's social media, when you can dig out anything and everything about everyone from the internet, that history can catch up with all of us. History. As we have already heard, Brij did not just write Fiji's history. He was, as John said, part of it. And John has already explained the part that he played as a commissioner in the 1996 Constitutional Review Committee. And in 2009, Brij became the icon of a darker chapter in the history of our country. Arrested, threatened, deported, banned from entering Fiji, and repeatedly criticized and condemned by the Fiji government. And his treatment became a political issue in its own right. These were the actions of our own government. Few, if any of us here, ever voted for that government. Indeed, in 2006, some in this government picked up some guns and chose themselves. But we have acquiesced in it, we pay our taxes to it, and whether we like it or not, it is this government that speaks for us in the wider world. And even though it was Brij and Padma who bore the burden of this government's actions against them, those actions continue to diminish and cheapen all of us. But that is the exact opposite of the books Brij wrote. To read a beautiful, well-crafted book about Fiji, to recognize the places and the stories, is a source of pride for all of us. Fred Wesley wrote an editorial in the Fiji Times on Tuesday, and this is what he said. He said, Professor Lal epitomized the value Fijians have for their connection to their homeland. In the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are reminded about this sense of appreciation and value. We are reminded about who we are, Fijians. Long after dictators and politicians consumed by pettiness have gone, consigned, as they say, to the dustbin of history, real history lives on. And that is only one of the legacies Brij has left us. I'm guessing that many of us here on hearing the news of Brij's death, picked up one of the many books he had written and which sit on our shelves. We have already heard much of Mr. Tulsi's store, and that was the book I picked up. Many of you know this collection of personal stories, ranging from Brij's childhood in Zambia to his travels in India and Fiji, and his life lived in between. Brij's grandfather, like mine, was a Girmitia. His grandfather served his indenture in Lambasa, as did mine. His grandfather remained in Vanuatu. Mine moved to Lotoka. Brij was his grandfather's favorite child, or so he said. I never knew my grandfather, who returned to India in his old age and died there when I was 3. And Brij's greatest talent, it seems to me, was to make history come alive. Sterile academic writing is the day job of the historian. Facts and analysis are what historians do. Those are what we expect to read when we pick up a history book. But we hope at least that the writing will be fluid and fast-moving. And in a lesser historian, this kind of work might be enough to create a respectable career and a justification, as they say, to rest on one's laurels. History might have been Brij's day job. But if you pick up today's Fiji Times and turn to page 35, you'll read an astonishing range of tributes to him from all over the world. I will not go into those tributes today. Go home and read it. Pick up and read his biographies of A.D. Patel and Jairam Reddy. Enjoy not just the history, which is the history of all of us, but the fluency and pace with which those books are written. And as we all know, Brij wrote much more than academic history. When he was writing about Fiji, he wrote with passion and humanity that defied academic discipline. He made our history human and readable and accessible, which is so important. Writing well is so important, because what is the use of writing history if no one will read it? And in the preface to his book, Broken Waves, this is what he said. In this account, he said, I make no special effort to invoke an impartiality I do not feel. When embarking on a comprehensive examination of the history of one's own country, it is impossible to be detached, unless, in the words of Professor Spate, one is a moral and intellectual eunuch. Who would want to be that? He said. And now he is gone. So who will write our history now? Who will write our history now? We can treat that question as a lament or as a challenge. And I would prefer for it to be a challenge to all of us. We have to write. We cannot all write as Brij did. Indeed, very few of us will ever do that. But we have to write things down. We have to record our experiences and make our own histories accessible to others. Some of that writing will be sober, objective, and professional. Some of it will be passionate and from the heart. Some of it will be good. Some of it, no doubt, will be terrible. But most of us, with a little careful thought, organization, and diligent editing, we can write. We cannot all be eminent historians, but we can all be historical sources. And I want to finish in this way. One day, the current chapter in our political history, which began with a so-called clean-up campaign, will end. And then we will be left to do the real cleaning up. Only then can Fiji be a better country. Only then can we realize the ambitions that those like Brij have for all of us. We have huge obstacles to overcome. We are a country racked by increasing poverty, apathy, and mistrust in the good that governments can do. How can we persuade people who are preoccupied simply with survival that democracy, good governance, and rule of law are so important to make Fiji better? And one answer to that is history. History beats dry books on law and public administration. History that is relatable, recognizable from shared experience, teaching us lessons about things we must learn not to repeat, and offering us examples to which we can aspire. To tell us what an ombudsman does, or at least what an ombudsman in Fiji used to do. And that is why the solid foundations that Brij has left us in his scholarship and his storytelling are so important. They belong not to the past, but to the future. And it is now for all of us, if we care enough for Professor Brij Lal's memory, to build on those same foundations. Thank you all.